Money shouldn't be the focal point of your time and energy when it comes to business. Relationships should be. After all, your business, no matter what it is, will be nothing without people. Now let's have ourselves a pocket-sized pep talk and meet our guest who's going to share key principles that will enable you to strengthen every relationship you have.
A pocket-sized pep talk, the podcast that can help energize your business and your life with a quick, inspiring message. Now, here's your host, Rob Jolles.
Today's guest, John Filoni, is an author, entrepreneur, speaker, investment expert, and the founder and CEO of Stock Squirrel Incorporated. He's the co-author of the bestseller, The Fall of the House of Hutton, the story of the fall of Wall Street powerhouse E.F. Hutton, which might be a nice podcast for me to meet you on someday. But his new book is The Covenant Secret, an inspirational tale about uncovering the 7 master keys of wisdom and wealth. Glad to have you with us. Welcome to the show, John.
Thank you, Rob. Happy to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here. So let's dive right in. You know, if you listen to my podcasts, you know that I typically believe a book finds you. So how did this book find you, the Covenant Secret? Tell me how this thing came to be.
It's interesting. You know, my experience in business and my whole background is Wall Street and as a stockbroker in management. And then I've done numbers of entrepreneurial ventures, CEO of a couple of companies. And I saw throughout my experiences of 40 plus years in business that people and relationships were not given the weight that they should have. I mean, you get a lot of lip service where people will say in their companies that their greatest asset is people, yet their behavior is totally different to that. And you come across whenever people mistreat people in business, they always come up with that great excuse, it's business. And I saw that the policies put into business were put in there for the lowest common denominator of behavior, rather than trusting their people and having the bad behavior be an anomaly. It seemed that the policies were there with expectations of bad behavior. So I think over a course of my career, the people factor was predominant. And interestingly enough, when I wrote this book 30 years ago, each of my the chapters of the book had to do with different stakeholders of a business. It's the shareholders, employees, customers, partners, vendors, the community you live in, the planet you live on. And I wrote about that 30 years ago, and today it's very timely since everything nowadays is stakeholder capitalism. So that's why I decided to get it released now, because it's very timely.
Yeah, it sounds timely. I'm looking forward to digging in. You know, it's funny when you say it's just business. I think of the movie Taken with Liam Neeson. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie, but kind of near the end, there's a guy he shoots, and because the guy said, it's just business. And he said, yeah, not to me. And he shoots him in the elevator. So there's a very dramatic point you're making here, at least went off in my head. Get to the covenant relationship part of it. Walk me through that. How does that connect?
Okay, so, I came up with 7 principles that come to ultimately the covenant secret. But I found that in business, there actually is a covenant relationship. And when I speak of covenant, it's biblical in strength. It's a sacred relationship. And I saw that where that existed was in the professional and client relationship. There's a true covenant. In other words, you can have someone walk in your store and have a clerk serve a customer. A professional can never let a clerk serve a client. So that within that relationship of a professional and a client is that covenant. And the covenant basically is this: when I am counseling you, when I am serving you, I am not thinking about me. I'm thinking totally 100% for your benefit and not my own. And there's the difference that makes a real covenant relationship.
Huh. Now, customer and client, you're separating the two of them?
Yes, and I believe that in all of our relationships, and I don't care if it's customer, employee, partner, vendor, shareholder, we should apply that covenant of a professional and a client, which is the ultimate in service.
Okay. And the difference between that and I'm trying to get the difference between the customer and a client.
The difference is we consider them totally and not ourselves.
Okay.
We do not, our benefit does not enter the equation when we are treating a client versus a customer.
Okay. I'll tell you a quick story. I did some work with, I'll name drop. It was Bank of America at the time. And I had written a book with Simon & Schuster called Customer Centered Selling. And they loved it. And they said, we want the training. We're all good, except one thing. We don't use the term customer around here. We use the term client. And I sort of scratched my head and I thought, well, I can't go and rewrite the book, but I did change the participant guides. I changed a lot of things because that was the culture of the bank at that time. And they, like you, to them, the two weren't really interchangeable. No. But most people like me will make them interchangeable. So it's interesting to hear that, how you separate those two. You're not alone.
Right. Thank you. It's a real significant difference in approach.
Yeah. As I learned the hard way. Okay. So, okay. And the book, sometimes we have to be careful. I know publishers run for the hills when they say, who's the book written for? And we go, oh, everyone. And they go, oh, right. But from your perspective, who's the book written for?
Okay, so I do it in a business parable format. So in that regard, it is written for a business person, an entrepreneur, and it's a parable of an entrepreneur. But that being said, I think it falls very squarely in the genre of self-help with the Napoleon Hill type of book, because the 7 covenant principles that I talk about are built upon universal laws of relationships and self-help. So and empowerment of yourself and others. So I think it's for two audiences in that regard, for the business audience, but also for those who are looking to just be better human beings.
Okay. Now, I was cautious on this one. When I was preparing to have our conversation, I will tell you that I put this question in and I took it out. Then I put it in, then I took it out. Now it's been out, but I'm listening to you and I put it back in. Then here's my question. But I really want you on your toes on this one. I want to hear about the 7 covenants, but I want you to nick them to get them nice and in a nice little piece for each one. So just nick the 7 for me, if you would.
Okay, so the first one is for sustained relationship success. Do and say to others what you would like having done or said to you, and do not say or do unto others what you don't want said or done to you. It's the golden rule,
right? And
I don't think you can overestimate the power of the golden rule. Again, that's biblical as well. And I come from a place, Wall Street, where the golden rule is he who has the gold rules. And so I don't think that it's a hard sell to anybody that the golden rule is paramount. Secondly is that which you show gratitude for increases. And it's a universal law that which we pay attention to expands. So we should show gratitude even for the littlest things that are positive in our lives, or the people that are positive in our lives. And you get into a universal law when you have people like the great mystic Meister Eckhart said that if the only prayer you ever say in your entire life is thank you, it will be enough. Plato said, a grateful mind is a great mind, which eventually attracts to itself great things. So it's the law of attraction too. And again, even if you're running a company and you're running it under certain metrics, be careful what you choose for those metrics, because those are the things that you're paying attention to in the organization, and it will be those that expand. The third one is to serve people optimally, discover what they value. And again, that's the difference between a client and a customer. Nowadays, with social networking and the internet, is all of our relationships are pretty shallow. But in the old days, what we used to have is deeper relationships. I was a manager at E.F. Hutton in the 80s, and the assistant manager. And not only was I a broker, but I was in charge of hiring and training stockbrokers. And my numbers were, and my rookies were off the charts compared to everybody else, for a simple reason. And they asked me about it, and I said, it's really simple, very simple. I would have breakfast in the morning with one of my brokers. At lunch, I'd have lunch with one of my brokers, and in those meetings, I learned about them as human beings, what they wanted in their lives, what they were trying to accomplish in their business, and then go back to the office and give them the resources they needed. It wasn't rocket science. It was just finding out what people need and value, and delivering it to them. The fourth one is honesty builds trust. Trustworthiness is the foundation of character. Character determines the fruit and pleasure of a relationship. Trust and trustworthiness are things that, again, it's cliche, but it's important in our lives to pay attention to that, and as well as in our business. I'll never forget something that had a real impact on me when I was real young. I was either late teens or early 20s. My father's best friend was dying with cancer in the hospital, and I went to see him, and he literally had only 2 weeks to live, so it would be my last time seeing him. And as I was about to leave, which would be the last time, and this is a man I knew my whole life, and he knew me my whole life, because he was my father's best friend. He said 5 words that were the most powerful words I ever heard. He said to me, as I was leaving, he said, "John, it was nice knowing you." It was nice knowing you. Hearing that from a man who knew you your whole life and was dying really was profound to me. And I thought about that, and it impacted me. Imagine us behaving in our lives with all of the people that we touch, that upon their deathbed, they can say, "It was nice knowing you." Yeah. So that impacted me in a significant way, and had me come up with these principles. The fifth one is the ability to influence others is the most valuable relationship asset. Demonstrated integrity determines the extent to which such influence is granted. And again, so it's performance, it's honesty, it's candor. When I was in the early 80s, I was a young broker, and I went and worked with this consultant in Texas who was working with high-powered brokers. And this is in the early 80s. It was $3,000 for a couple of days to spend with him. So he was good. And the first thing he does before you're to spend the next couple of days with him, like 18 hours a day working with him, he brings out a huge dictionary, and you look up the word honesty, and you really tear that word apart. And before he continues, he says that you must make an agreement. We must have an agreement here now that you will be totally honest with me in these next couple of days. Otherwise, you're wasting your money. Go home. So I agree to that, and everyone does. And then he asked the very, very first question, which was one of the most profound, if not the scariest question you can ask someone. He says, "John, what is it about yourself you don't want me to know?"
Sounds like a trick question to me.
Yeah,
That's a rough one.
Isn't that? And he said some of the answers he got were just off the charts. But again, it's that sharing and that authenticity that is more important today than ever. About 10 years ago, the snowboarder Shaun White, the kid with the crazy red hair, he won several gold medals in snowboarding. And when he came back, Fast Company magazine had him on the cover. And the article was, they were asking him the question, you've been offered about 25 different endorsement deals, yet you've only accepted 3 of them. And why is that? And he answered, he looked at them like the guy had 10 heads. His answer is, because I use the products. And that's so different. In our days, when we were younger, you pay Michael Jordan $1 million to advertise this coffee cup, and he will. And he'll say it's the best cup he ever had in his life. Not today. I mean, millennials, Gen Z can smell inauthenticity a mile away. So our authenticity, our candor, and our honesty is really important. The 6th one is passion plus compassion moves mountains. And it's that, the Joseph Campbell follow your bliss kind of thing. And in serving people and serving others, whether they be your employees or customers or whoever, it goes back to, as I said before, sitting down with them and getting beyond the fluff, but getting beyond the social media kind of attitude where everything is shallow, getting deep as human beings and finding out what human beings, because since we're all human beings, we care about the same things, our family, our future, impact on the world, our legacies, etc. So passionate yourself, find out what you want to accomplish, and find out that the person, the human being across from you, where those passions converge, and maybe you can have something there. The 7th one principle is, what you believe determines what you think, how you decide, the actions you take, and what you accomplish. This is a very important one in that people don't realize, say if you get a result that you don't want, people will typically look at the action they took that got the result and the decision they made in order to take that action, and they'll stay there. And that requires discipline, it requires attention. But if you really want to make changes, go back to someone's belief system, because beliefs, when you truly believe something, it creates certain thoughts in your head, which create certain decision making, certain actions, and certain results. So it's if you're not getting the results you want, take an inventory, not just on your actions and your decisions, but what you really believe. And like one of my key beliefs that I take forward is that the universe is working in my behalf, no matter what. And that way, so you don't see things as, you don't see yourself as failing, you don't see things as negative. You see the magnanimous universe giving you information and feedback to know where you should be directing your energies. So those are the 7 principles that lead ultimately to the covenant secret, which comes at the end of the book.
Right. Okay. And now, folks, I asked him to nick them. So that's why you get the book and dive in deep to each one of those. Again, the book, The Covenant Secret, an inspirational tale about uncovering the 7 master keys of wisdom and wealth. Now, I'm going to cherry pick one right off of there because you're talking to a sales trainer. So I'm curious about the influence part, where you mentioned influence and how important that is. I'm giving you special permission to dive a little deeper into that one, if you would.
Yeah. So, well, let me go back into the sales training part of it too, because I would always be training salespeople and working with my people as well as myself. One of the first things that I would do as a sales trainer, which I found so powerful and something that no one does, and use it.
I haven't heard it yet. You don't know if no one does it yet. I'm 40 years in the business. Go ahead. Well, tell me what no one does.
Well, yeah. Let me ask you. The very first thing I do, and it's worth the price of admission on the results you get. the very first thing I have people do is to do an inventory for me of your top 10 clients. And top 10 meaning not just in revenue, but those you enjoy doing business with as well. Or it could be someone that gives you a very little business, but gives you a lot of referrals and so forth. So I let them do not only a demographic of those 10, but a psychographic as well, and find out the personalities of these people. But then I asked the question, is how did you get those 10 people? And without a doubt, 99% of the time, the methods that they are using to prospect or build their business have absolutely no chance of finding the people that they found in their top 10 customer list. And it's really interesting. They'll come up with something really obscure or something that never really resonated with them, but you'll find it within those 10 top customers. So again, it's just go ahead.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I'm waving my arms. He's looking at me. I'm nodding and pulling. I'm itching to get in. First of all, I love the question, by the way. I would argue that as a former insurance salesman, if you looked at a lot of my first bigger clients, they were people I walked in the door heavily networked with. Typically, I had a head start with them. I think that's one of the reasons why your theory holds up, which is, okay, so now we got past that. How about the rest? For instance, at New York Life, I remember in my first 2 months, I not only led 24 apprentice field underwriters, I led half the Washington GO in sales. Now, coincidentally, I have 36 first cousins who live in the state of Maryland. Okay, so thought I could get a smile out of you, but then I had to go dig in a little bit. Let me revert. I'll throw one back at you. The first question that I ask is for them to actually define what it is they're doing when they're selling. Just define what selling is, and I have to tell you that's a fascinating question also, because most people who sell don't really know what the definition of selling is. In other words, I even give them, I'll say, here, I'll give you 4, you pick one. And they all love, well, my job is to listen and to take the needs of the customer and provide solutions to those needs. And one of the other ones I write, which is kind of the same definition, but it's got bigger words in it, I'll tell them, how about linking the specific needs of the client to the benefits of your idea or your solution? But tucked into those 4 is one obscure one that says persuading customers to fix existing problems, customers or clients. And nobody picks that one, by the way. And no one. I mean, I've done it for that question. I've asked for 25 years. I poll it. I would say it polls in at about 1 to 2%. So 98 to 99% are, I'm going to listen and take needs. I'm going to listen and take needs. But when you really learn about selling, and I want to go too deep into my world, but I'm not arguing with the fact you have to listen. I would like to ask questions as well, but I don't want you to be an order taker either. I need you to take your idea, put it in somebody else's head, and make them feel like they thought of it. And
isn't that what Steve Jobs said? He's creating things of needs that you don't even know you need.
Right. Right. I want you to own it, but I guess we're both coming from a very fundamental level, which is it's astonishing how many people who are in the world of influence, they don't even like to use the word.
Oh my God. Rob, I think, a word that I'm in search for hiring employees for my business or anything. And you can find them when you find them there. It's so powerful, and they can be in any business. I don't care, because there's one word that's lacking, and the ones that you want that have this word are very powerful. And it's what you're talking about. It's caring.
Yeah,
it's actually caring. Yeah. And when you find someone who cares, you can do anything with them.
Right.
And it's funny too in sales, people will always say, "Oh my God, he's a great salesman. God, can he talk this time?" And I say, "No, no, no, no. The great salesman, you have no idea they're selling
Exactly
you
right.
anything.
You don't have no idea they're even coming into the room. The one who talks. Yeah, that's
you
that's
bought.
the pitch
They
man.
didn't sell. You
Right.
bought. They did
Right.
not sell. Yeah.
Right. That's the stereotype that you think you're looking for. The salesman sold you 25 minutes ago. You don't even know it.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's very funny. Sometime maybe we'll regroup. I'd love to just go nose to nose with you as two sales trainers, but I want to get back into with you and your world. And what I love about what you're doing is the relationship part, because it's funny. You said that one word. For me, it's empathy. There's a lot of empathy that has to go on, particularly if we're doing our job. I have to sometimes ask you questions that are not so difficult, that are not so easy for you to answer. They're a little bit more difficult. This is what is connected to your fear of change. This is what's holding you back. This is why I get paid. So let's talk about the relationship part of it, because that's what really, one of the things that really interests me about your book and where you're going with this. So talk to me about how you tie relationships into all this.
Well, and I start the book this way too. If you were to ask business people what business is about, they're going to talk to you mostly. It's about money, right?
Right.
And so it's the classic money versus people thing, and I answer that unequivocally because it's people. Because even money comes through people. So whether it's a customer or an investor, you're not going to get a dime unless you have a relationship, right? So the people factor and the relationship factor is inherent in anything and everything we do. And so it's not something you can escape. And what I went when I took on this book, I wanted to find the keys that establish that very special relationship in which we can influence others and help others, and knowing that the more people we help, the more we help ourselves.
Yeah, well said. On an obscure note, 12 years ago, I got licensed as a live auctioneer. Only do charities. It's a way of giving back. If you haven't done it, you'd probably be very good at it, particularly for the charities, because you're a salesman. Anybody can chant, not anybody can sell on that stage. But I can't tell you how many times I get in early with organizations. All they wanted to talk about was the money, the money, the money. And I said, no, it's the experience. We build this experience, and don't worry about the first one. Wait till you see what the second and third do. I've worked with groups that made $3,000-$4,000 on their first auction. And one group in particular, they've done about $3,000 on the first one. They've cleared a little bit over $500,000 on the 9 combined. So meaning they got the message that said, we got to work on the experience. We got to work on everything around it. Sort of like that field of dreams. If we build it, they'll come. Right. And
it's funny you mentioned that too, because this whole thing with stakeholder capitalism, where it used to be, prior to recently, is the shareholder is paramount. Everything in a company is done for the shareholder, and a lot of that was done at mistreating other stakeholders, which are employees, customers, vendors, partners, the communities we live in, etc. But I happen to believe is the shareholder is still paramount. However, in today's world, the best way to serve the shareholder is through serving the stakeholders. I look at the shareholder and the profitability of a business as the scoreboard. And the only way you can affect the score and the scoreboard and benefit shareholders is by playing on the field. And that's with the rest of the stakeholders. That's where the game is, and I think that's critical to know.
Yeah. Well, it's good you're out there helping people. It's good that you've written this book, because I think people missed the mark. I think they're kind of bypassing the relationship and focusing on the dollars, and it just doesn't work that way. But you have to be patient, because I almost said it's not as fun. But we all want to focus on profitability. We as Gordon Gekko said, greed is good, and I don't disagree with him. By the way,
right.
You know, as crazy as that sounds, meaning I want to work with people that want to be profitable, that are looking to be successful, as opposed to the one who doesn't care. So I'm not putting them down for that, but I'm saying that, you know, it's instinct versus logic. What you're saying is logical, but it's not necessarily instinctive.
Correct. And I look at that in the same way, you know, like you're talking about greed is good. And again, it's how you define the word. And I talk about also the virtue of selfishness, that behaving in a selfish way is good. And that has to do with passion. And I'll tell you, don't look at selfishness in a pejorative sense. The example I give on that is, you know, you can look at some of the greatest artists, writers, even Steve Jobs were tyrannical, but they're fulfilling their passion and being virtuous in that regard. To smack someone in the face with the concept, I'll say I can make the case that Mother Teresa was the most selfish human being on the planet in her time. And people will say that's ridiculous. This is a woman from morning to night. She would suffer with the sick, and I mean, her life was pure suffering. But isn't it interesting that she said that this is her quote, the more I suffer, the closer I feel to Christ. So her suffering is actually selfish. Right? Not in a bad way, but it's what drives her. And our key is to find, in a selfish way, what really turns us on. What kind of relationships, what kind of business, what kind of art, what the impact we want to have on the world. And it behooves us to find that out.
Very interesting point. I hope people who are driving, I hope you're still on the road from that one. That's it's a powerful statement you make. I'm processing it. Let's push to. Give me just a moment on that one. Just I'm processing Mother Teresa and where you took that, and yet I can't disagree with you.
You can't.
Huh.
You can't. She said, "The more I suffer, the closer I feel to Christ."
Right.
So that's why she suffered so greatly.
Right.
She chose the suffering.
Well, okay. Well, you know, I'll tell you what, go listen to a lot of my podcasts. You don't hear Rob Jollis taking deep breaths every now and then, but it's just a powerful statement you made. And basically it's the Gordon Gekko greed is good kind of on steroids. You just upped it a level, but we're from the same ballpark that says once you know that, then you have to understand that, again, rather than pitch an idea, we have to appeal to that in some way and understand it, not run from it. Yeah.
And you know, it's like if I'm counseling someone in their 40s and they've been a lawyer or they've been a business person and they're struggling and want to counsel with me on, they want to change careers at 40, but they think it's irresponsible. They think it's stupid. Everyone's advising them not to. So here's my question to them. My question to them is, well, rather than sitting across from me, how about sitting across from an 18-year-old? Would you ask an 18-year-old advice on your career path? And they say, obviously, no, that's insane. Well, that's when you decided to be a lawyer.
Right.
And it's okay at 40 to decide, I really don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah. You hit on something. You know, I actually wrote a piece. I write these things called blog articles. I wrote one on that. And, but not what I did was it's kind of whenever you're battling a business decision like that, pull yourself out of it. Pretend that you're talking to, and when I say your children or something, I don't mean a 9-year-old. I mean an 18-year-old, a 22-year-old, somebody coming maybe out of school. If they presented the same question that you're struggling with to you, how would you answer it? And most people who I mentor and coach immediately see the light. They're like, oh, well, I would definitely tell them, you can't let that hold you back. You've got to pursue that. Life is, we only have one shot at this. They just erupt. And it's like, well, so I think I called the piece something like, giving yourself your own advice or something like that. But it's a really powerful way to do that.
And it brings a question to my mind, which is a little off, but I'm reminded whenever I was watching a program or a movie with my kids, and they were younger, and inevitably in a film or a sitcom or what have you, someone would end up in a psychiatrist's office, and they would be at 40 something years old, and they'd be asking them, tell us about your parental relationship and what your parents did that affected you, that made you the way you are today. I would start when that came up. I would stop the program. I would pause it. I'd look at my two kids and say, okay, when you're 40 years old, what problems do you have with your parents that we could discuss now rather than waiting until you're 40?
That's great.
So that's the spearhead, the problems there, and it's funny. That would get a really cool discussion with your kids. No one asks that.
Right. It's very cool. Huh. All right. I could go all day with you. Let me bring us in for Lenny. How about some mentors? Do you have any personal mentors for you?
I've had numbers over the years, as we all have, but I think I think the most powerful mentorship I've had were from my parents. And my father was a Boston police officer. My mother worked for the Boston Police, and they were really good human beings, which I've just lost both of them in the last couple of years. But the thing that my father taught me, and it showed me what it is to be a man, was to do the right thing. Okay. The power that my mother added to that was, from my mother, I learned what the right thing is. So I think as far as mentorship, those things, and throughout my career and the mentors I've had in business, it always led me to the person that would follow those two principles, is of doing the right thing and really knowing what the right thing is. I think it was, I forget the consultant that talked about the difference between effectiveness and efficiency. And unfortunately, in a business where we're looking at efficiency far too much, where, efficiency is taking a ladder, putting it up against the wall very efficiently, a great ladder, climbing up there efficiently. But effectiveness is, you got to ask the question, is it up against the right wall? Right. Because, I think whenever I've had a mentor, it's someone that has the wisdom to really know what the right thing is, what the right direction is, and then to follow up by doing the right thing as well.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you put out a definition for that, because I really do think, and I'm hoping people are listening very carefully right now, that we all need mentors. My father was my mentor. He passed some years ago, and I found almost a void that I needed to fill. I didn't realize it at first. I just knew that there was a hole, but we do need mentors. You just got a great definition for it. And I'll say one other thing. I think our dads were cut from the same cloth, because I dedicated two of my books to my dad, but one of them I wrote because it was one of his favorite sayings to me, which was, and it sounded so harmless at the time, but go into business for a few years. He said, a deal is a deal, even when you don't like that deal anymore. And I thought, I think he gave me that one at 22. I'm like, yeah, right. I'm at the popsicle stand or whatever. But when you go into business and you're in business, let that one settle in a little bit too. And it really it's another version of what you just said. Just a little aimed at a certain direction, but I have lived that, and it's not always easy. And yet there's a lot to that. How do people get a hold of you?
Okay. I'm available on johnfaloney.com. I'll also be launching an investment app in the next couple of months called stocksquirrel.com, and I can be reached via that as well.
You let me know when that happens. We'll when are you launching that?
In between 2 and 3 months.
2 and 3 months. Okay. All right. We'll be out before then. Okay. The book, The Covenant Secret, an inspirational tale in uncovering the 7 master keys of wisdom and wealth. I'm assuming we can get that wherever we want to get our books,
Amazon,
right? You bet. Okay. And we, one thing I always ask our listeners to do is, we know you're going to buy it, but we want reviews on that book as well. It means a lot to authors. So please don't forget that the algorithm is real. Amazon takes it seriously. So if you like today's show, and you better have, then you not only go grab that book, make sure you give them a great review as well. John, I'm grateful to have been able to spend the time with you. I really feel two minds connecting on a lot of things there. So I enjoyed the conversation. I'm grateful you were able to spend some time with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I truly enjoyed it, Rob.
You bet. Well, we'll do it again as well as we can next time. Until then, everybody, stay safe.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please rate and recommend it on iTunes, Outcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more information on this show and Rob at jollis.com.